First, we need to make sure that my microphone is not muted. Welcome, everybody, to the stream. Hope you're doing good. I am doing great. Glad to be back with you, working again on these fun creature head designs. We're on head number 2. We did some shadows last time, some ambient shadows. We put a quick color fill on it. And so we're ready to just kind of continue rendering on head number 2. So come with me on this little creative journey and hope you're doing something creative on your end. And if you are, good luck with that. And remember to save often. All right. So jumping right into things, what is the next step here? Well, I think we need to keep going with these colors, right? We only have a base fill, and that is certainly not enough. So color number 2. Let's get a little drink going here. Spender of Pineapple, classic. Hashtag not sponsored. Okay, flat. And what color? Well, I think we probably want. I mean, there's going to have to be some textures and gradients and things with this overall fleshiness here. But yeah, there's probably a reason to have a different color to some of this inner stuff. Now, I would like to try and do something that's not excuse me, that's not monochromatic. So, okay, let's do this. Let's sample this color here. Now I'm going to go here and use my friendly lab slider, and I'm going to take this pink and I'm just going to shift it to the other end. So we get a blue-ish color, relatively blue. Actually, let's go a little bit less green. Okay, yeah, let's try that. I'm going to try to pick some spots here to have a hue shift. And this is definitely something to think about when you've got a creature that has a lot of sort of organic areas where maybe there's a little bit of a lack of clear separation between parts. You've got to start thinking creatively about where can you create some separations. And sometimes the only solution is to have some gradients going on, which again, I said we were going to do that and we will. But start with the areas where it feels like you might be able to make a more clear separation first. And then you can come fall back to gradients and things. I remember at this point, gosh, a long time ago, I was working on a boss design for an MMO, and I had done a 2D sketch, but I didn't render the sketch, and I decided I was going to go from sketch into ZBrush, and I was really far along in the sculpt. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just poly paint some of the basic color information in here to give myself a head start on texturing. And I realized that since I hadn't rendered the sketch, that I really hadn't thought a lot about the color scheme. And I was having a really hard time making it not look kind of monochromatic and sort of boring. I guess this probably, let's see, I guess we'll separate it here. Um, And so I turned to my lead and I was like, "Hey man, like I feel like all the forms are cool here, but just not it's not clicking for me this color scheme." And so he was like, "Well, if I put it in grayscale, you're kind of missing out on an opportunity to do gradients, which could help you separate all these organic forms." And I did that and lo and behold, it looked really sweet. So, those are all those like little learning moments, right? And you take those with you. And now, as part of my color process, I never forget about the power of gradients, and more importantly, what sort of value choices can be made by integrating some gradients into your coloring workflow. Now, here I've just done a hue shift, so you'll see that they're indistinguishable value wise, which is a safe place to start, knowing that you can add some gradients to create a value difference. Um, yeah, there's definitely going to be, because we can see there's some slight separations here, so we'll definitely be able to play with some more. But I saw an opportunity to have a distinct change here in the sort of inner part. And I think we'll just continue this theme all through the mouth. Maybe the glottis here we give a different color because it's a fun little unique organ. Maybe the tonsils get their own color as well. And the tongue, I think, is a natural choice for a different color. I guess we're going to color that little piece, and I was sort of entertaining maybe a separation there, but I know some of you are in a very different time zone, and a lot of you watch the stream on your own time. So either happy Halloween, or I hope you had a happy Halloween. My Halloween is coming up very soon here, and I think I'm going to be hanging out with a buddy's little daughter, going trick or treating with them. So that'll be kind of fun. I'll live vicariously through a young one. Okay. And this is very blue right now, but we don't necessarily have to go this blue. It could be that it's just slightly cooler than the existing pink, but for my sake, just seeing what the heck I'm doing, um, I like to start a little bit louder. A little bit louder now. I guess we can't see the tonsil on the left side, can we? I recently was playing with a little cyberpunk edge runners image, which you guys can go see on my socials. It was kind of fun trying a little bit more of an anime style. I mean, it's definitely not my strong suit. Yeah, if I did it more, obviously I would be I'd totally be able to adapt to it, but I don't typically do anime style. So, it's not, I don't think it's an on the nose anime look. I kind of adapted it a little bit to my look, but yeah, I think I want to maybe try another image that's kind of like that. Well, my EK remote is going to be low battery on us, so let me go ahead and take a moment to plug that in. 2 seconds. Got a cable here to deal with that. And we're charging. Yeah, so if you guys are interested in seeing some of that stuff, you can check that out on my like Instagram or my DeviantArt or my ArtStation, any of those. Okay. Well, that's that one part separated. I think there's some other parts here. Well, let's see. I'm going to play with the hue of this actually. Let's go a little bit more purple with it. And then with the tongue. Whoops, go there. Okay. We go there. Let's sample this purple and let's go a little more blue. And yeah. So what I'm kind of doing here is I'm creating like a progressively cooler transition. I don't know if this is cool enough. Are we noticing? That might need to be a little cooler, huh? Yeah, let's try that. Okay. Flashbang warning. Sorry, that was a late warning. My bad. I really, I maybe there's a setting for that. You know, like the transparent grid in Photoshop. If you could set it so that it was like dark, like the inverse. Hang on, flashbang warning again. I'm going to see what this. I never really pay attention. Yeah, if we could do like an inverse. I know. I guess an inverse wouldn't matter, right? Because yeah, the dark squares of the checkerboard are still too light. I don't know. I don't ever play with that, but that's interesting. I wonder if I actually here. Sorry guys, we're just gonna go on a little Photoshop preferences adventure. Guides, grids, and slices. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look like you can customize that grid interface. Okay, not seeing anything obvious, so we'll abandon that for now. But that would be interesting if you could change what the transparent grid looked like so that it did not blind you when you were seeing it. Hmm. Okay, let's go back to this color here. And I think we'll do... Oh, I don't have a mask on this. Well, let's put a mask on the folder so I don't have to worry about staying in the lines. There we go. I mean, I was thinking that these bony horns, I guess we'll call them, would be an entirely different color. But I think there's something interesting about using the color of the interior mouth section here, connecting it to the horn, how it feels like there's this like inner layer. I like leading your eye through the design like that. So let's hold on, my phone is beeping something. Let's see if we can silence the nonsense here. There we go. As I was saying, yeah, using the color of these horns to convey further the idea of an inner layer. I guess we still have our sketch showing here, don't we? Where is that? Where is the sketch layer? Oh, it's there. Yeah, we can turn that off. There's our first buddy here. Our oh, you know what I did is I shifted all these flats, didn't I? What did I do here? What did I do? Okay, whoops. Well, the yeah, we accidentally shifted everything around there. That's why that horn looked off. So I shifted it by accident. You know, sometimes that happens in Photoshop. You get a little bit of brush lag when you're using the move tool, that shifts things. Did we get that corrected? I think we're good. Yeah, that looks correct. Now we've got, well, actually, so these here, I think it'd be nice to tie these back to the tongue so we get some flow through the design that way as well. And it appears as though these things need to be on a different layer. I want them to be with this layer. There we go. Right now on this layer, let's grab this color. And let's color in some weird goopy stuff around these eyes here. So we're kind of like trying to make these big choices where there's clear concrete separations between value or color first, and then we can leverage gradients and other micro textures to enhance these things. But that's not to say you wouldn't face a design at some point where there are zero separations, like I was saying with that design I worked on for that MMO, and you just need to have gradients be the only solution. That's fine too. And now I think the teeth here connect with these weird little horns protruding through here. Um, Lighter or darker? That's a question. I think lighter because I think the eyeballs will be lighter. And I think this design in general has this kind of a light pastel thing going on. And it might be kind of nice to continue that. So let's sample the pink and let's shift it a little bit more yellow and we'll go brighter with it. Okay, let's see it as a starting point. Let's see how that's going to feel. This might be too saturated. That's okay. At least I can see what I'm doing clearly. I've been a little negligent on my fill command, so I think that's okay. We haven't had any huge regions to fill in. Yeah, it's definitely too saturated, but that's fine. Easy to correct. Easy to correct. And now we tie it in to our eyeballs. I'm going to pull the saturation down. There we go. That is more what I was thinking. Okay, so now we can see we have not as much separation in terms of value, which is sort of making these a little bit more subtle transitions, which is kind of unifying them. And I like that, but then I think we can play with some gradients here. I think the first obvious place to start is this big fold right here, I think, is a place for us to play with some kind of transition. Maybe it's like the nose in general kind of has a coloration to it, and then it kind of comes down and it blends down. So with that, we'll connect there, and we'll do, I guess we could just do, let's do a normal layer. We don't really need to be fancy here. And, oh, you know what we can do? Okay, so first let's pick our color. I don't know why my keyboard is like being weird. Let me turn my keyboard off and then on back again. Are you gonna be weird? There we go. Okay. Right. So we pick this color, and then I want it to be more red and darker and more saturated, I think. Yeah, let's try that. Now, without thinking about gradient, I'm just going to color in a little bit beyond where I think I want this gradient to occur. Except for this top edge, which I know exactly where I want it to stop. But the edge down here, though, I'm just going to paint a little beyond so that I can use a mask to create the transition. Now on this side, I guess we can do this little edge right here. Separation is a little bit harder to see on this far side, but we can go with that. Now, as we do this, we are also thinking about what this is doing to the focal point of the design. It might be strengthening one we've already made, or it might be establishing one that didn't exist. I think in general, I want people to kind of be looking at the mouth area. Maybe we're kind of establishing this is the focal point because it's kind of where like the eyes would be. So that seemed kind of interesting. And maybe I'll go a little further with this red. Ooh, maybe we'll follow. There's not really an edge there. Let's just make an edge. Let's just do that. Maybe we'll go a little further on this side. So we got plenty of room to work with there. Okay. And now we'll add a gradient or an alpha mask, and we'll paint in the gradient. Let's do this. And now we can adjust the opacity of this to get just the right fall off. We might look at grayscale to see how much we're affecting local value. So that seems like that might be a good starting point for that. And with that same color, let's isolate, select. We can introduce little bit of that fall off elsewhere. I think I like it maybe on the ends here a bit. And maybe it comes in from the backside a little bit here as well. It's very subtle back here, isn't it? I think that might be because our gradient is actually expanding a little too far back here. There we go. I might want to go a little bit darker. Let's see. Okay. Okay, that's looking interesting. And maybe we do a little bit here. Here again, we're going to have to play with the gradient to make sure it doesn't go too far down there. Okay, that creates kind of a cool situation. Let's see. Now with the, I think that's kind of addressed the gradients I want to do to this outer pink skin area. Let's do some stuff to the purple. And that would be this layer, right? Yes. We'll sample and let's see. What do we want to do with this? I think we can go maybe again a little bit warmer, a little darker, a little more saturated. And maybe we go for darker kind of at the ends. So we'll go kind of, so it's like a lighter, paler purple down here, kind of in the depths. So this is kind of playing with a little bit of like that uh, idea of like skin kind of tanning as it's exposed to light. And maybe we'll do it kind of to the top of this here. Now it's on its own layer, so we can easily play with hue saturation here to play with that. Okay, I just go a little darker with it so it's a little more obvious. If we look in grayscale, we can check to see what we're doing to our value structure. Definitely looking kind of interesting. I think we might be able to get away with a little bit of the inverse treatment here, and maybe lightening some of this innermost area. So I'm going to kind of do this, and we'll do a little bit of, now some of this is going to be a little tricky because it's in shadow, so it's going to be a little harder to notice it. But like here, for example, I think is an area where we could maybe emphasize that here, here. I have spoken previously during this little creature head project about how I really think about this as if I'm kind of in ZBrush. And what we're doing here is this would be like the poly painting phase, right? Maybe I mentioned that on the previous Demon Head as well. But I mean, this is something you could easily execute with poly paint, right? We're just basically doing basic colors. We're doing some simple gradients. We're not getting into any intricate texture work. Yeah, I mean, you could do that in there as well, but you know that requires a little bit more setup. All right. And the last thing to think about is the tongue. And I guess the eye stalks. Or I guess we could maybe do something with the bone as well. So we got a couple other ones to consider here. This one, I'm not sure. Let's see. I have to play with this to know what we're thinking. See if we can play with maybe a little bit of a lighter top side to the tongue. And maybe it's a little lighter at the bottom here. And on the inverse of that, we can go with a little darker, a little more saturated. Maybe with this point connected to the eye. And kind of underneath the tongue here. And this will kind of look like lighting. Right? That kind of gives the impression of lighting, but we're playing with local colors here, local value choices. Now, how loud? That's pretty loud. Makes the tongue definitely a focal point of the design. I might pull back on the lighter aspect here just a bit to... Yeah, I think that's going to be a little better. It's getting a little loud there for my liking. All right, and then moving on to the bone. Can we do something? Oops, that's my favorite Photoshop gaffe, is alt-clicking a layer instead of alt-clicking between layers. Makes the window freak out. It's appalling to me that is not a feature you can disable. Great job, Adobe. Right. There's the bone layer. There's my gradient layer. And so we could play with, does it get lighter on the ends? Does it get darker on the ends? I don't think I want it to be gray, that's for sure. Let's see, what's the story with the... Maybe we'll do a little darker at the base. We'll go a little more brown at the base, maybe. Let's see how this looks. How saturated can we go with this? Okay, I like that. Let's isolate this color here. Oh, did I do it? Oh, no, I didn't. Oh, interesting. Oh, well, I just sort of... What is going on here? Give me a moment here. I am wrestling with some of this background nonsense. I alt-clicked the wrong layer. Okay, I think we're back. Yes. Okay, good. Okay, I wanted to just bring in some of this color at the base of the tooth. I wonder, does this want to be more red? Could be. Play with the hue in just a moment here. I have a suspicion this wants to be a little more red than yellow. Let's see. Interesting. I actually don't. Yeah, I don't know. Actually, the color we had was. I think the color we had was correct. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. It's subverted my expectations there. I guess it's because we're getting a little bit of a compliment with the blue. Um, Now, what we're not really playing with here is any green to subvert the red or to complement the red rather. So maybe I'm trying to see if there's maybe some opportunities to do it in the skin here. Maybe this outer layer. Let's let's play with this. Let's do one more layer on this outer skin. And okay, so that's a little too green. Now is there some kind of rhyme or reason to that underneath that one there? Okay. Okay, there's something kind of cool about that. Whoops. I think this purple is reading a little too saturated. Just sort of like it a little grayed out there. Let's do one more level of saturation here. Right around some of these, the nostrils. Maybe this is just confusing, this element here. I think maybe, let's see. No, I like that. Okay. But what I'm entertaining here is pushing maybe this greenish gray out a little further. Yeah, that's kind of cool. Okay, so we've got our base colors. We've got our gradients. Now let's play with some textures. Remember to save your work if you're working on something, and let's move to the next phase. All right. Yeah, definitely we're going to go with the screen tone here. Just kidding. Rather, let's try do overlay maybe. Oh, okay. Yep. Oh, okay. Yep. And let's play with the rotation a little bit here. I feel like we're getting a little bit of weird. Yeah, that's better. Yeah, that feels better. Okay, good. Now let's rasterize. Well, I think what I'd like to do is make the base hue a little cooler to counteract the extra warmth that the pattern is bringing. And then we'll rasterize. Oh, actually, we lost a little bit of that potency, didn't we? Okay. So I guess we'll go a little heavier with it. And then rasterize. Yeah, there we go. Something to always look out for is the effect of the pattern overlay changing after you rasterize. The reason that happens is because you'll have maybe layers clipped to that. Like in this case, we have the base color and then we have these gradients clipped to it. And when we put the pattern overlay on the base, it's showing us how that's looking with the interaction of the other clipped layers. But then when we rasterize, it changes how those layers are interacting. So something to kind of be aware of. Now we want to add that same kind of information to these gradients as well. Okay, yep. Now let's see if we rasterize this. That one stays pretty much the same. That's good. Actually, maybe like this lighter tone getting not quite as grainy, but maybe we'll still put some on there. It's getting really, really out of control, isn't it? I'm just looking for a little bit of noise on that so that it doesn't feel too digital. I think that one's fine, but let's throw a pattern overlay on that as well just to see if it helps a little bit. I don't think we need it on that one. Let's go now to this guy. Okay, let's rasterize this. See. Okay, so we're going to have to go a little heavier with the effect. Okay. Now, the blue parts. Now that one definitely looks wrong for this. So let's try. Okay, I just get a little bit of grain on those, which I think is correct. Now the bony parts. Well, I guess that in the eyeballs. And this one, let's go here and let's go here. Okay. Okay, so we got a little bit of grunginess there. I think we probably want that on the gradient as well. Yeah, there we go. Okay, we've got quite a bit of color stuff going on here. Now we could introduce maybe a little bit of like bigger patterning. Like, if we have some spots or something. It's always fun to play with. Let's see how that might look. Now, the question is like, yeah, what is that? How does that manifest? Thinking maybe we try to maybe bring in some up here. Let's see. I mean, you look at all the guys who do the best creature designs. I mean, they do not neglect to consider any of these possibilities, right? Like all the steps we're going through here are the bare minimum for executing a creature on the highest level. So now I'm trying to create a little bit of a blend from the darker red to the lighter gray with some of this spotting. I'm just manually painting it in because there's too much uniqueness to this pattern. I need to have control over its specific granularity and positioning. Can't really rely on. I mean, we could maybe use like an overlay potentially, but I think this is one of those things where I'd just rather get in here and sort of dial it in myself. See if we can maybe get a little bit more obvious one in here. So at this point, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to move your eye through the design. So where we see this spotted element happening up here, then we also see it down here. And our eye, as a result, moves through. It's the idea of repetition and creating cohesion and flow through repetition. I mean, those are things that you can achieve all kinds of different aspects of the piece. Here we're seeing it being used, being utilized with the patterns. So we can create a little more obvious one right there. Oh yeah, that's nice. So what started out as this sort of like blob of weird fleshy stuff, we're starting to give it some really clear definition. Now maybe we can play with a little bit of spotting ideas with some of the lighter surfaces here on this dark section. Let's see how that feels. Okay, maybe, but maybe not as dense. Then we go for like a pretty big, a little cluster here. We definitely got a lot of texture going on now. And we have control still over coloration independently. So I mean, we could easily shift these things around and play with them. I'm pretty happy with what we have, so I don't know that I'll change a whole lot, but I do feel like maybe that tongue is still a little too saturated. So let's just pull this back a little bit. And we of course have specularity, reflections, and things that we can use to further distinguish areas. Like the nose area might get a little more wet looking, obviously, like the tongue. So we can definitely play with that as well. What I never addressed was what we want to do with like the pupil and iris here, and I think that might be a situation where we kind of draw from our existing palette. I don't want them to, actually kind of don't want big irises on this. I think they're creepier when they're kind of small little slits like that. But I'll kind of dither the edge a little bit. It could be that there's some veins kind of running through. Oh, I guess I want a little bit more flow to this. There we go. And I guess we didn't really play with the idea of veins anywhere else on this creature, so maybe that's another thing we can integrate. Yeah, that could be interesting. Okay, let's play with that. Okay, let's make this a soft light layer. Or maybe not. It's hard light layer. Oh, it's kind of being weird, isn't it? Let's do hue. Oh yeah, okay, so oh, interesting. Okay. Ah, there we go. Okay, let's do a round soft brush. Now, what we might do is go into the AO and actually kind of accentuate some of this vein information. I'm trying to put these in some places where it's a little lighter, places where we're more likely to see vein information in terms of color. We could see it elsewhere in terms of if the vein is, of course, bulky enough, then we could just see the light hitting it wherever it is. But for color, we're going to see it probably more likely in those paler spots. And now if we go into the AO pass, we can play with, do we want even a little bit of form information on these veins? Which makes them extra creepy. And you could, of course, design the veins into the form pass. If this is a super, veiny creature, then or maybe it is just maybe we don't see it as much on the head. But if the part we were designing was very heavily veined out and had that super vascular look to it, then maybe the form pass would have been the place to do that. But I kind of imagined it a little more subtle, like just more of a hue tweak there. And so you can see we're getting some really cool effects there with that just subtle shadow on those slightly cooler spots. Well, it might be time to bring in some directional lighting. Very exciting. You guys ready? Let's do this. Multiply. Let's put our head mask on the layer. We'll go for 40%. I don't remember exactly what numbers we used on head number 1 here, but I'm gonna kind of go for a similar lighting scheme where we go for lighting from above, and then we maybe accent with a little bit of rim lighting. So that way there's some consistency in our presentation, even though these heads are so dramatically different looking. And what we haven't done yet is we haven't adjusted the lightness of our flats globally, meaning we haven't attempted to adjust the amount of ambient light in the scene by adjusting how bright our flats are. For me, what tends to be the case is that I tend to implement all of my flats uh, brighter than what I may want them ultimately, especially if we're going to go for like a little bit more dramatic, moody lighting. We're going to want to bring down the brightness of all the flats globally to imply less ambient light. But you may be doing a scene where there's a lot of ambient light, it's very bright. Maybe it's an outdoor scene, and then having your flats be all very loud might be the right call. So, but we can play with that very easily. Let's put the shadow in first, and then we'll play with that. So, starting with whatever is the most obvious, we can begin there and adjust shadow shapes easily because we're working in this sort of a graphic way. And of course, in this phase, we can dramatically affect how much volume these various forms have by giving them a distinct directional shadow. Now, I think all this probably lives in shadow down here, probably cut off at that moment. These are always the big decisions that are so critical that I think artists sometimes are a little nervous to do. But if you approach it in this way, kind of graphically and on its own layer, hopefully you'll feel a little bit of confidence to just see what happens when you make a really bold choice like that. I have to make some decisions about this jaw piece here. Maybe I have to do a little bit of a progressive shadow there. You can get definitely some shadow on that little edge there. And when I'm doing this, I do like to have the opacity of these shadows at least 30%. Here I'm operating at 40%. We don't have to stay at that level, but I like to be a little bit louder when I'm blocking it in so that I can just see very clearly what the heck I'm doing. High visibility, because what you want to be able to do is have a range of opacities for this light function. Like it should look okay. If we were to go higher to like this, that should still look correct, right? I mean, it's going to make the lighting look very different, but this should still look okay in terms of the shapes. So again, this kind of emphasizes why I think it's good to have your shadows in the blocking phase be dark enough to see them very clearly. I know some artists that even block these in with at 100%, which for me is a little bit extreme, but I get the mentality of that though. Like I totally do. That if it reads graphically, then it's going to read when you maybe introduce a little bit more nuance to it. Now, of course, we're going to have some really dramatic stuff happening with shadows inside the mouth because this whole upper jaw casts a shadow down. We just have to kind of choose where we think that cutoff might be, and I'm thinking maybe around here might work. Let's carefully navigate around those front teeth there. And all this in shadow. So if we go inversely, you're seeing some really dramatic shapes starting to unfold here. Now the sharpness of these edges here is determined by a couple things, primarily the roundness of the shape. Well, first we have to figure out which is a form shadow, which is a cast shadow. If it's a form shadow, its sharpness will be determined by the shape it's curving over, as well as how diffused the lighting is. So if the lighting is very focused beam hitting this, then a very tight focused beam, then we're going to have a sharper edge. If the light is, like, for example, maybe very close to the head, we're going to have a very clear definition there. As the light gets further away and diffuses out, becomes bigger, that edge will soften. So we have some control over the feel of the lighting by virtue of the shadow edges here, which is cool. Now, we do want to think about, well, I don't know that I want it to be super different than this one, but we've already made the position of the light the same. So I think we have some freedom to play with maybe how diffused it feels. And just if we think maybe some of these hard edges are really cool, then that might be a reason to have the light feel a little bit more intense and closer to the object. I think I do want a little bit of shadow casting from this lip here. And maybe we'll have this tooth hit the light a little bit there. We get a little bit on those gums, maybe. We got to kind of think about how much depth the form has, and does it warrant that level of shadow. And the tongue is going to have some thickness to it. We might want to cut off the light at some point there on the tongue. I want to talk for a moment about the treatment of a cascading set of shadows like this here. I think one of the best places you can kind of look to see how to treat this when you're implementing graphic shadows as your first foray into the shadow pass. How do you deal with a kind of gradient of shadow? In this case, we have a series of these sort of bumps. Go look at how comic artists add black shadows to muscular arms. The forearms in particular have a lot of sort of long, thin muscles. And oftentimes there is a light hitting the arm that has to cascade and roll off of those forearms, but they're using hard edged black shadows. So, how are they doing that? Well, let's see if we talk about, let's say this is going to be a really kind of simple example, but let's say we've got an arm and there's all of these sort of like pipe like muscles going all along it. Now, this is silly, of course. The muscles are much more unique and nuanced than this, but let's just say for simplicity that this is sort of like the muscles of the arm, right? These are each sort of like tubes, and let's say we've got a light that's hitting from over here. Let's see, maybe we can position this a little bit more. Let's say we've got a light hitting from there. So when we're doing graphic shadows on something like this, we're going to kind of think about the cutoff, and then looking at again, these are all kind of like equally sized muscular tubes. We'll shadow this muscle here with about 3/4 shadow. So you can see here how if we kind of measure the difference between light and shadow on this muscle, we get 3/4 darkness and 1/4 light. Then we go to the next one over and we can go right down the middle. Then we go to the next one over and then we do the inverse of this one. We go 1/4 darkness and 3/4 light. And then, maybe you could put in a little bit here, but what you're seeing though is you're seeing a way to implement a hard-edged graphic shadow that could be fully black, right? We could do that. And we're conveying the idea of light rolling around a cylindrical surface or an organic surface that it has a cascading effect. And this basic concept is exactly what I'm doing when I play with the placement of the shadows here along these edges. Now, this form is very kind of chaotic. Like the muscles are not organized in these nice little tubes, so we have even more freedom to kind of get a little crazy with this. But I just wanted to kind of mention that this is the sort of core idea behind how we're shading some of that stuff. Okay. We got that little demo out of the way. Let's see. What do we need to do still with these shadows? I want to go a little bit longer with the shadow here. I mean, we could do something where we cut it off here, right? Like that could be interesting. Actually, maybe that's cool because it kind of emphasizes the geometry of the overall head shape there. Definitely implies more of a bend. It puts the light a little more above versus in front, which would maybe constitute a little bit deeper shadows on some of these forms. So remember that we can't make a lighting choice in a vacuum, right? We have to think about how is it going to affect everything else. But not hard to do in this world where we're approaching shadows in this simplistic way. And again, it kind of like helps you think about light and shadow shapes from a design standpoint, which is always weird for artists, I think, to think about because you're thinking, well, what kind of design choices do I really have available to me? Don't I just have to sort of follow the logic and and try to be as realistic as possible? And I mean, that is a goal, but within that though is a surprising amount of little tiny nuanced choices that should be considered and optimized for readability. And when we look at light and shadow shapes in this simpler way, we can assess them from a design standpoint easier. Okay. All right. I think that there's definitely hey, welcome in. Appreciate the follow. Um so we can also bring in some coloration to the shadows, but I want to get some nice lighting on this set of weird floating eyeballs here. Again, thinking about our lighting from above, and again, here we're making a bold choice. Like, maybe we just don't see any of that eye stalk getting hit by the light. So, I like that we can be really bold with some of those choices. Let's play with some tint to the shadows. We did tint our ambient shadows, so we can even just take that same tint and apply it to our directional shadows. So if we can see here, it's very subtle, but notice this is sort of just a gray shadow, and then we turn on the tint and we give it a little bit of warmth. Makes it feel a little bit less dead. This is essentially just playing with some tint of the ambient light in the scene. We're not playing with the idea of subsurface scattering here. We can implement that as its own pass, and we should, especially with something so fleshy as this. But I like to kind of address that separately. I like to think just right now, what is the coloration of these shadows? What is the color of the ambient light in the scene? And then we'll worry about subsurface scattering later. So now we can decide how dark we want those shadows to be. I think I like them to be a little bit bolder here. I think I like this sort of clear value separation. I think it gives a lot of nice geometry to this head. And now we want to blend some of those edges. And to do that, I'll just go to a smudge brush here. I'm going to use smudge texture, which is it's a way to kind of soften edges, but then gives it a little bit of, if you can see here, it's a little hard to see, but there's a little bit of like texture to this edge that prevents it from looking too blurry. Now, for those of you artists out there that work very graphically with very hard edges, like a Marvel Rivals look, um, or a Valorant style, this is still going to feel very soft for you. But in the world of sort of like realistic soft shadows, I am attempting to still give it a little bit of texture. Now we might do a little bit of a actually, yeah, let's go back here. I'm going to give it a little bit of a global Gaussian blur just to soften all of the shadow edges globally a little bit. I do this so that I don't have to come in and try to soften any of the cast shadow edges. I only have to worry about the form shadows. And the reason that we don't keep any of them super hard edged, at least with this style, is I want it to be clear the difference between a form and just a light. I don't want any of the shadow edges to feel as concrete as an actual form has. I want there to be a little bit of a difference there. So that's the idea. And I'm considering now with this pass, how intense do I want that light to feel? How close do I want the light to feel? If you imagine like this was a lamp just above this head, that edge would be very, very uh, obvious. As that light gets further away, that's going to get more diffused. But I kind of like this dramatic edge, so I'm not going to diffuse it too much. You can kind of see the effect we're getting there. It's always cool to see a very sort of stylized light start to feel a little more convincing with some careful blending going on. I'm going to diffuse that cast shadow a little more because this is coming off of the top of the jaw. And so the distance between this form here casting down, I feel like we're just going to get a little more diffusion of that edge. we can't forget about our little eyeball friends up here. Diffuse that around the sphere of the eyeball. Okay. Pretty good situation going on there. Now I think with this in place, we can make a decision about how bright this light feels, and this is where we can use the a global brightness adjustment. In fact, I said that, and now I'm thinking, yeah, I actually do want literally a brightness adjustment on the flats. I'll show you my layer stack real quick here. So all the green layers are all the different colors of my design. I got some little textures and patterns, right? We got the bone layers, we got the tongue and the eye stalk. So they're all here. And then I've got this adjustment layer here. It's a brightness contrast adjustment layer. I'm going to hold Alt. We want to make sure that this is not nested inside another group. That can happen. If that happens, then you can't clip it. Hold Alt and hover between the adjustment layer and the folder, the layer group that all the flats live in. We're going to connect it. And now when we adjust, we're going to be adjusting, excuse me, we're going to be adjusting all of the flats at the same time. So you can see here, we can sort of bring down the intensity of the key light in our scene. And consequently also the amount of ambient light, right? So we can kind of adjust that here. And that can be nice when we want to introduce maybe another light into the scene that wants to feel brighter and we don't want it to compete with this light. We could also make it really bright. So again, we get a lot of control over what's going on. So I think I'm going to just pull down the brightness a little bit. Because I am going to bring in a rim lighting on the back here, and I want it to make sure that it feels nice and impactful. But first, we can do some specular and diffused reflections. So let's go ahead and create a little group for additive light. Hey, Tom, how's it going, man? Happy Halloween to you. Okay. Now, we don't have anything metallic going on with this creature design, so we don't need to do any sort of weird blending mode stuff. So I think I'm just going to go in with a normal layer, and we'll just start to kind of bring in some reflectivity. Now, all this is going to be based on our key light. So trying to get a little bit of the idea of like shiny, wet quality to the end of the nose here. And the fact that we had a little bit of a darker local value to the nose really helps us push that shininess. You're working on something that's like a reflective armor or something. It's definitely good to think about what's the base value supposed to be for the armor. A lot of times artists misjudge that. They make the base color of the armor too bright because they think, wow, it's shiny armor, it's got to be bright. And it's like, well, it's bright, but it's bright because of the reflections, not bright because of the value of the base metal. And you might be trying to really give something a reflective quality and be fighting it because your highlights don't read when they're sitting on top of a base value that's very light. So that's the first thing to consider. can you make your job easier by just lowering the base brightness? And here again, we've got a situation where I'm trying to make this sort of gum area look kind of wet and shiny. And the fact that it's darker base value, I can imply that without having to go crazy. Something you can also do is you can, for things that are wet, you can bring a little bit of reflection into the cracks and crevices to imply some of that the moisture in between the forms. Something you can kind of look at for that is if you go look at like like things pulled out of the ocean, right? Or fishermen pulling fish out of the ocean, or various like museum aquarium like museums where they have a lot of demonstrations of pulling things out of the tanks and stuff to show them, like octopus and squid. Take a look at some of the photos and you'll kind of see why things look wet. It's not just that the top surface is wet, it's that they become shiny in the in between parts. Now the lighting has to catch these surfaces just right. It's not going to happen everywhere. But because we have this light from above, we have opportunities to have the light hit in between some of these forms. And I'm really trying to take advantage of that here. And the other thing, obvious thing to mention, is that a wet surface is going to feel very specular. So the highlights want to be sort of small and intense versus broad and diffused, right? Diffused and subtle. That is not the look you want. So we kind of see the effect that that's having. And it really starts to add some additional realism to things. All right, now the question is, how shiny do we want the teeth to look? I mean, that's kind of a choice to be made. I think I do want there to be a little bit of sheen on those. So we'll put a little bit there. See if we can see we get some really, really nice values going on in that area there. I want to kind of continue that sort of specular shine to all of these sort of front fleshy areas here. And then we'll play with the light being a little more diffused on some of this stuff back here. Like the skin maybe gets a little kind of drier and rougher. I think that's just kind of going off of creature logic or kind of evolutionary adaptation, right? Where we have the outer parts usually kind of tougher, more armor like, and then some of these inner areas don't have that quality as much. I mean, the most extreme example of that would be something that actually develops scales, right? Like that's like some severe armor going on, or like a pangolin, right? We have like really extreme examples of protective outer layers. But one thing you don't want to do is rely on the specular reflections to make the forms readable. Because if you're doing that, then what that means is you're applying an sort of equal reflectivity to all surfaces, and it's going to feel less interesting and probably less realistic, right? Like there's variable reflectivity to surfaces. Like this area up here, we don't have really any reflection going on here, specular or diffused. And it's reading fine, right? Like we're not really confused by that surface. It just feels like a very flat surface, and we're getting that effect because of all these, well, the kind of the subtle contours, some of our ambient shadows, certainly some of the position of these directional shadows here. So we don't need to have some big shiny hot spot on here to make it feel dome-like. We could do that if we wanted to, but we're not relying on it, and I think that's the key. Don't rely on having everything be shiny to describe it. You shouldn't need the full value range on every form for them to be readable. If you're using the full value range on everything, then everything is equally loud. Everything feels like it's made of the same material. Um, and you're going to get a piece that has what's described as fractured values, right? It's you don't really know where to look. Everything is screaming out equally to you. It's a problem. I don't know if I like that little. I put a little shadow shape there, and I feel like it's a little distracting. I'm going to kill that shape there. So again, I'm kind of working from like these inner layers out to the outer edge because I know I want these inner ones to feel a little bit more glossy. Here's another thing to think about. So like this shadow shape we have here, you can see that we have a softer form edge to the shadow right here. And then down below, we have a cast shadow. In fact, I'm going to slice that so it's a little more obvious what's going on. So here we have the cast shadow coming off of this sort of mound shape down onto this strand below. And when you see a cast shadow edge, what that's telling you is it's indicating the angle of the light, right? Like the reason this edge exists here is because the light is being blocked and getting hit by this mound here and then being occluded and then creating an edge of shadow here, right? Like it's basically an exclusion of light based on this shape. Knowing that angle based on that edge allows us to also place highlights in a very opportune place, a very logical place, which is just beyond the edge of that shadow. You can really create some nice realism if you kind of double down on highlights that are just sort of at that bridge of the cast shadow. Remember, not at the form shadow edge, right? But at the edge of a cast shadow edge, that can be a really cool spot to hit it hard. Um, I'm not doing that everywhere, and this is more of kind of like a little trick you can play with, but can be very effective. The thing that gets weird about specular highlights is that they're based on your position, the viewer's position to the object, right? They kind of move as you move, which is super weird. So as an artist painting without some kind of reference in front of me, we're envisioning this creature from our mind, obviously. it can be sometimes a little hard to tell where those specular reflections are going to be positioned. But that ambiguity, though, of it is also kind of nice because then it allows us to sort of place them, adjust their positioning a little bit, within reason, right? Whatever still feels logical, to best explain the form shapes that we're working with. Here, I'm gonna kind of fix this shadow up of this little horn here. It's kind of feeling a little weird, a little janky. Also, sometimes I miss finessing every shadow edge in that blending pass. Any plans for Halloween? I'm just gonna go with my friend out. He's got a young daughter who's gonna actually do trick or treating, so I'm gonna just kind of hang out with them and kind of live vicariously through a young person. So yeah, I think that'll be pretty fun. How about you? You got anything going on? Sometimes it's nice to just maybe have a relaxing, chill night with some fun movies, some scary movies. Oh, it's not that big there. Oh, that sucks, dude. Yeah, I guess it's not. Yeah, it's not universally celebrated everywhere, is it? Well, it's my favorite holiday, so I would be bummed out. I would be sort of trying to bring the festivities wherever I was. Get a little shine on those little horns. So again, here I'm trying to kind of like taper off a little bit of the shine as it goes further back here. So maybe try to be a little more metered about it. But I do think this creature looks sort of appropriate with a certain level of kind of glossiness going on. Also, there may be some spots where we felt like the maybe the form wasn't described enough with the ambient shadow, and so we can leverage a little bit of the reflections to help sell those forms. It's not against the rules to do that. We just don't want to be relying on that to solve all of our form challenges. I'm going to see about trying to get some of this stuff to read. We have a really nice vein there that I didn't accentuate in the AO pass. Let's get in here and let's give that some form. Nice. Okay. So now we can maybe hit a little bit of a highlight on that. Actually seeing like a vein here, which is interesting. Like I didn't actually paint the vein in, but I'm seeing like a weird part of the texture giving a kind of implied vein there. So let's just roll with that. Kind of curious what this would look like if the purple was actually green instead. I'm just gonna kind of mess with that for a second here. More of a bluish green. I like that. Let's see. No, I think I like what we got going on. A little more of an analogous scheme. I want to play with some highlight on the horns. I don't know how shiny I want these to look. I think there's a chance here for us to maybe have something feel very shiny. Okay, yeah, I think I like that. It's looking pretty creepy. I guess this feels somewhat appropriate for Halloween. I know it's not on the nose like a spooky ghost or a skeleton or something, but it's a creepy creature guy, so maybe that fits. We kind of did our Halloween thing a little early. We did the Samhain guy last month, so yeah, oh yeah, definitely get some slime and saliva in this. Absolutely. Yeah, not a question in my mind in the slightest. Very much needed on this guy. There'll also be some chance to introduce a little bit more kind of unique micro detail in some spots. I'm not going to abuse it, but I mean, we definitely want to kind of give ourselves a chance to explore that. Kind of like on this head here, we did some of that duplication of some of the horns and scales going on. So, I want to also give myself a chance to do that on this guy. The other thing to think about too with some of these more reflective pieces is to think about how tightly the skin is stretched. Uh, if you're doing the reflections on a human, for example, and you're painting the arm, and the arm is bent, you're going to notice more specularity around the elbow because the skin is pulled tight, and so it kind of makes that surface smoother, and a smoother surface is going to look more specular, right? So we can use a little bit. Now the skin feels a little loose here. It feels a little kind of more like it's draped. I don't feel like a whole lot of tension, but that can give you some ideas about where to lean into some of that reflection. Now the tongue here, I think, wants to feel very kind of wet and gross. So let's see if we can get a nice wet sort of vibe going on. And again, here we're going to leverage that idea of like the cracks being sort of brighter. I'm playing a little fast and loose here with some reflective, some reflected light. But I'm going for a very wet look for this tongue. I'm not actually sure what happened. There's a weird little like red edge there, and I sort of think maybe we kind of yeah, I think we ended up missing a little bit of that edge with our purple pass here. Take a moment to clean that up just a bit. In fact, that edge in general just kind of got a little weird, didn't it? Okay. I'm glad we glad we noticed that. This stuff tends to come to light when you get in here and you start trying to do all these little details. So let's just kind of do a quick little on and off of our reflection pass. You can see how it's helping these read really well, but we're not abusing it everywhere. It's a very careful approach. Whoops, I just painted that on the wrong layer. How many times have you guys done that? It happens to me all the time. I was reading a post about, I guess the Adobe did some kind of weird like presentation at some software summit somewhere about new features. And of course, like the conversation was dominated by a bunch of like silly AI stuff that no one really wants. But there was one feature, I guess, where they're using AI to help you auto tag layers, and the audience was like cheering wildly for that. And I was thinking to myself, Yeah, see, that's a smart place to use AI, right? Like, yeah, make some clever little efficiencies for us in our process versus trying to make some kind of weird artificial version of us, right? Like, but unfortunately, like with new tech and everything, all the investment upfront comes from whatever this sort of like loftiest goal is, which is, oh man, like this tool can literally like replace vast numbers of people. And so they always kind of aim for the biggest, I guess, most toxic to humanity version of something first to get all the investors, because investors are dumbasses, right? Like when it comes to creativity, they don't know anything about how to actually design anything, right? They just look at charts and numbers and go, well, this made a lot of money, so I guess we do that again, and this didn't, so let's not do that. So they're kind of moronic when it comes to this stuff. And so when you've got companies trying to make tech, they've got to sort of come up with stuff that's going to impress those people. And again, when you say, well, we can invent something that'll replace an entire person, it's like investors see the dollar signs spinning in their eyeballs, and then they start opening their wallets up. Um, and then they have to see the consequence. Like they don't they're not smart enough to envision the public reaction, right? Like they don't go that far. They just see production cost, and then when they see like, well, everybody hates this crap, and in fact, when the rubber meets the road, a lot of these tools are actually kind of annoying, inserting themselves into your process. Um, then we start to back down from this, you know, lofty and unrealistic replace humans idea, and think more about how can we empower the humans that are there. And that gets into some of these nuanced applications, like, can you help me auto name layers? Um, like the select subject option with the magic wand tool is awesome. I don't know anybody that wants to spend time manually selecting a shape. So help me do that, right? Like those are I think smart ways to implement, but that's not the first place they go with it, right? Because an investor isn't going to be like, oh my god, like helping people lasso select faster, that's going to be crazy cost savings, because they don't understand the process, right? They're dumbasses when it comes to the actual process. So just you just gotta kind of, let's weather the storm, people. Like you gotta kind of live through the cash grab. Yeah, it's like the whole like NFT crypto crap. Everybody can goes to like the extremes first to get all the investor eyes bulging out of their heads, and then we come back down to reality. You want Clippy to have a comeback? Yeah, there we go. Just a little guy pop up, start talking to you. Looks like you're trying to make something look good. Let's add some reflections. All right, we got to do some specularity on this eyeball here. I think we're gonna just kind of go heavy with it there based on that top-down lighting. Let's apply some a little bit of bounce lighting. And we haven't even explored if this lighting is going to be maybe a little bit tinted or not. And we could tint. Right now we have neutral light hitting this object, but we could maybe go with a little bit of a tinted light. We actually did that for this guy, right? We made the lighting a little bit cooler, which was an interesting thing to explore. Hey, 7 and 40, appreciate the follow. Welcome in. We're just painting some spooky monsters here for Halloween. Or yeah, hey, you haven't saved in a while and stuff like that, dude. Exactly. Exactly. And it's just going to take a little bit of time for us to get to that layer, but it's nice to see like Adobe is starting. Hopefully, the reaction at this conference of everybody like, cheering for these more kind of nuanced and helpful tools will get them kind of snapping out of it. Like, maybe we don't invest all our time into some gimmicky AI feature where, you pull up a little box and you say, paint me a dog, and it puts some stupid ass dog in your image for you. Like, it's like, why are you wasting your time with that? Help me empower the creatives that know the skills, right? Like yeah, anyway, we could go on an eternity on that stuff, and maybe I'll end up doing some more chats at the school I teach at regarding some of that stuff, but I'll keep that kind of commentary a little bit light for the stream because I kind of want this to be a little fun hangout for artists. I don't want us to be in here you know, we have enough of that stuff assaulting us all the time, and I'd rather have a nice little. This should be like you enter a cozy coffee shop with all your art friends, and you're just in the creative zone here, right? Like that's. I mean, if I could just be in that space 100% of the time, wouldn't that be nice? I mean, a lot of artists get into this stuff because we're trying to kind of uh, cope with the challenges of reality, and what we create is a way for other people who are not artists to cope with reality, right? Like video games are a prime example of that. We're crafting another world so that way when you're coming back from your job, or maybe you're working with angry shoppers or whatever it is that you're doing, then you can go, you know I don't know, become Kratos and cut the heads off some demons or something, right? Like, um, yeah, I mean, and I know that there's people that have serious health problems that they use media and sometimes games and stuff to as a therapeutic way to get through challenging times. Um, yeah, it's just an important part of society, right? So, okay, did we get all the reflections in that we wanted? I think we're looking pretty good on that pass. Again, I'm not going to really put much on down here because this is sort of all in shadow down here. Maybe we want a little bit of highlight to some of the eye stock stuff here. It's sort of like facing up toward the light. I kind of neglected that a little bit. Yeah, there we go. Kind of be careful about that. I don't want it to defy too much of what's going on with the shadow edge here, right? Like this is maybe pushing it a little bit, having a highlight on this, but we're kind of saying it's sticking out from the surface, so it's kind of getting a little bit of that light. These again, like those little micro decisions that you're making as an artist that on their own don't feel significant, but when you make 1,000 of them over the course of an image, it really does have a big impact. Okay, let's play with some light decay. I want to get a little bit of a sense of gradation to the light, and to do that, I'll use a soft light layer, or maybe not. I've been playing around with some other blending modes recently, so maybe we'll, oops, come back here. So let's see if we do, yeah, overlay, for example. We don't lose any of the richness of our colors if we do that. And we can see we get a nice sort of cascading light effect there. So that's the other thing to consider about light. It's really annoying, I guess, how complex light is, right? Like, is this a lot going on? And we have to think about the fact that there's also the light decays over distance. I mean, it depends on what kind of light you're working with. I mean, you could make a choice that this is a very strong light. Um, and we don't really notice the decay across the surface of this. A perfect example would be like sunlight, where you don't really notice the decay of sunlight, right? It's just it's too powerful. It casts its way through an entire scene. Um, you'll notice it maybe when the sun is very dim, like it's almost ready to go behind the horizon, right? Then it loses enough intensity to notice that stuff. But when it's up in the sky and shining down, it's just too powerful for you to really notice decay. But when we're talking about like an indoor light, like here in this case, I didn't really imagine this being like the sun hitting him. I imagine it's some other indoor light source or something. Um, those are perfect opportunities to play with the idea of light decay. And it's just for me, it's very easy to introduce decay as its own layer here, versus trying to kind of modulate shadow darkness or brightness as we're painting through. Just doesn't make a lot of sense. This is so easy to just introduce that. Um, okay, and now the color of the lighting is, I don't know that we want to do. Well, let's play with it, and I think there's different ways we could do this. Um, but one of the ways might be to use curves. And oh, that actually we can't clip it to. Oh, I just found a little Photoshop limitation here. Okay. So then, okay, I have a new way to do this. Let's do this. Let's do curves. Okay, so I'm going to pull this over here so you guys can see what I'm doing. So actually, I'll show you the layer structure first. So uh, here's all my layers related to this head. And at the top, I've got a curves, and I just have a mask here on the curves adjustment layer. So that way I'm only affecting the head. By the way, if you guys don't know this, if you want to actually view the mask, you alt click the mask and it will actually show you the mask. And you can even paint and adjust the mask here as you have it visible. So that's kind of cool. Shift clicking the mask hides the mask. Alt clicking it views the mask. So just some fun little masking hotkeys there. And now with that curves adjustment layer selected, I'm going to go into the properties, and I think, well, I don't know, but I suspect that a lot of people play with curves as it relates to the overall value structure of an image. Like if we come in here and we play with this, we can kind of mess with the values. Um, but I never use curves for that. If I'm going to do some kind of lighting adjustment like that, I'll usually use levels. I use curves to adjust the coloration on a gradient. It would be a little bit like adding a gradient map that has some kind of warm, cool transition across it. But I think it's a little easier and more elegant and more nuanced using curves for that. And to do that, we're going to switch this from RGB to a color channel. This is where it maybe gets a little bit weird, is you have to think about the fact that the blue channel can also introduce the opposite color, meaning that if we reduce the blue in the image, we're going to pull more yellow into the image. So whenever you're choosing a color here in curves, you sort of want to think about what is the complement of colors you're playing with, not just the literal color that it's saying here in the list. So if we were to play with the blue channel, we're basically introducing blue or yellow. The green channel, we're using either green or purple, and the red channel is sort of red or cyan. So yeah, green is a channel that I tend to not mess with as much. Usually I'll go to the blue channel first and then maybe the red channel. And when you're messing with this, you've got a graph here that you can add points to, control points. The easiest thing to approaching this, rather than trying to kind of like find specific points, is there's a great just kind of rule of thumb is put a point in the middle and then put a point either in between the bottom in the middle or the middle and the top. So either here or here. And then you're going to just pull it diagonally one way or another. And what it's going to do is it's going to create a little sine wave in this graph, and it's going to start to kind of shift the coloration one way or another. It's going to give you maybe kind of cooler highlights, warmer shadows. You get a little bit of that interesting gradient going on. And you can slide this further up or down based on where you want that change to occur. Now, there's a really helpful bit of information in the background of this graph here. You'll see called a histogram. And a histogram is just basically showing us the distribution of values in our image. So if we go, actually, it's showing us the distribution of this color channel in our image. And what we'll see is that we have a lot of lower values in this range, and we have less over here. So as we shift the points on our graph, if I shift, for example, a point, let's say I make a point up here and I shift it a little bit, what you'll notice is that I can make really extreme shifts to this, and it's only changing a very small part of this image. And the reason is because if you look at the histogram, there's very little information in our image that lives up in this upper region. So changes to the graph up here won't really be affecting our image very much. But if I change a point down here, you can see there's a lot of values in this range, and man, I can really change the entire image dramatically there. So this is just a kind of a quick way to feel a little more comfortable using curves and just using it to kind of visualize what's going on. So you can see here, I'm now playing with a really extreme ramp that lives in the core values of my image by pulling this point in, and we're adding a lot of warmth to the shadows, and we're really pushing the highlights to be super, super blue. And I can pull this down, right? So we can get a little bit of that shift. So you can see now we're getting this really interesting kind of cool light, warm shadows thing going on. And this is an adjustment layer. So you could play with the opacity of this layer. You could change the blending mode of this layer, right? Like you could maybe use this to control just the hue of your image or just the saturation. There's so much control you have with this. It's really, really cool. And the same thing could go for the red channel. You can see that we switch over to red, and those have its own set of control points. And we could then start to introduce something different here, right? We could start to play with this stuff. Um, there's no science to this. This is just knowing how it works and then playing with it and trying to find the feel that you want. That's all it is, really. So again, here I'm kind of using some of the curves here to give our image an interesting sort of cool, warm sort of feel. And we might like that. We might think it looks weird. Maybe we like it a little bit. So maybe we kind of just pull in a little bit of that look. Get a little bit of warmth in the shadows, a little bit of cool in the highlights there. And I think there's something kind of creepy about that sort of pale look to some of that stuff up there on the top. So I think we'll actually go with that. I'm going to leave that in there. I like that adjustment. And maybe we play with a little bit of rim lighting now. And I started a little late tonight, so I'm going a little over. But I think we'll probably want to kind of wrap up here soon. So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of end with a rough implementation of the rim lighting here. And then next time we will kind of finesse the overall image and bring in any additional details that we want. Yeah, it does kind of give it a snail vibe, doesn't it? Yeah, that's a good point. I like snails. Now, I'm not really sure how far this rim lighting is going to kind of come into the form here, but we might as well play with a lot of rim lighting to start with and see how much is too much, and then we can dial it back. Because otherwise, you're going to be chasing an unknown endpoint forever, and that's not a good use of time. Now this rim light is a little less effective here at the top of the design because we have a light kind of competing with it, which is like maybe a little bit of a lighting faux pas that we're doing there, but it is definitely doubling down on our focal point, though. So I guess there's that. I'm gonna try to introduce a little bit more of it here. And I think there might be a reason to have a little bit of it hitting this nose here. We can say, well, that's jutting out far enough to where we're going to be getting some of the rim light hitting that. Obviously, this horn here could be getting some of that rim light. I think we can justify it hitting this horn here. Maybe we can get away with it here. Oh boy, I'm getting really daring now. And I might be able to get away with just a little hint of it back there. That might be getting a little too daring. Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we could dial up the grossness factor pretty hard in the end, which is cool. Definitely want to have a whole pass where we kind of play around with that. I don't, it's interesting. No, I was evaluating if I still liked our curves adjustment, and I do. I'll kind of mention something here to be cautious about with global changes to the art like that. When you've been looking at an image for a long time, you become fatigued. You become, the image sort of becomes bland, and you can start to react positively to any big change to the image. So you've got to be very cautious about it, which is again why I like to have some of these changes on a layer or a version of it, so we can go back to the original and see did we just do the change for the sake of a change, or was it actually like a meaningful improvement to the image? Um, yeah, just something to kind of be aware of when you're doing some of those adjustments. There's a little bit of a hard edge to this shadow here that's feeling a little distracting to me. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit here. This is our, yeah, that's our, I'm going to diffuse that out a little more. I think it's because we have also the gradients of darkness on that tooth there that's feeling a little abrupt as well. Maybe I'll do that too. And the highlight maybe is just feeling a little too sharp. So yeah, I think it was mainly the highlight actually doing that. So maybe I'll just kind of go for more of a vertical highlight there. I was playing around with that sort of like ring of highlight, almost like hair, like a Fresnel style reflection, but it was just too distracting in the end. Okay, hey Dominic, yeah, thanks for hanging out, man. Enjoy your Halloween, and hopefully we'll catch you again soon. We could even play with a little bit more bounce light under here if we wanted to. Have a little more light hitting below the form. It could be a different color, even. Certainly something we could play with as well. Like, I mean, you can add as many lights as you want to this image, right? Like, and it could be nice to kind of bring a little bit of a cooler tone to some of this warm tone down here definitely give it a little more dimension to it. So I'm going to just quickly throw in a few quick loose hints of a cooler light from below. So that way we have that as a reminder next time that we want to play with that idea. Put it down here underneath this horn as well. Yeah, I don't know if that's the right color. I don't even know if that value is working. I mean, it's actually probably working fine, but yeah, we'll have an opportunity to play with that. Maybe a green is a little bit better there, because the green I think reads a little more like lighting, versus if it's too purpley, then it starts to maybe read like some of the local tones we have in the creature itself. So I think maybe a cyan is better there. And then we'll have the overpaint phase to kind of wrap it up. But yeah, I think we definitely are creating some interesting stuff going on there, and yeah, we'll definitely have that pass too, where we play with some of the weird drippy saliva stuff going on, and yeah, maybe some stuff dripping out of the nose here. I think we'll play with maybe some scars or some damage to the skin, obviously subsurface scattering. Like basically, there's a whole sort of like finalization pass that this head needs. But I think it's in a good spot. I think we've established most of the core ideas here, and I'm feeling pretty good about this. So yeah, that's I think going to be the stream, guys. So again, happy Halloween to everybody. I hope you do something spooky and fun. And thanks for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody.